7 years ago, the Aarons published a new book series called Bravelands. Unlike their previous animal fiction series, this one would cover a variety of species across predator and prey boundaries to tell a cohesive narrative set in the African wilderness. There was a lot of controversy over the series. I remember a lot of Warriors fans were angry, saying it would take the Aarons' attention away from A Vision of Shadows, the newest Warriors arc, and even more dramatic was the accusation that beyond being just weird in general because of it having both predator and prey points of view, Bravelands was a blatant ripoff of The Lion King, the blockbuster film by Disney about lions. Then the next Warrior Cats book came out and people forgot all about Bravelands. I know that literally everyone and their mom has forgotten about Bravelands at this point. I know this controversy has been dead and in the ground for at least 6 years now. However, I feel like this book series has been judged a bit prematurely and a bit unfairly, and it deserves a second chance. So today, we're going to be taking a second look at Bravelands and seeing whether it is original or a ripoff of The Lion King, and whether it is worth reading. I will be going over the plot, so spoilers are ahead. I will give a warning before I start with the spoilers though. But before we get started in general, if you are new to this channel, please think about subscribing. I regularly post both Wings of Fire and Warrior Cats content so you'll never be bored. And to my current subscribers, thank you so much for supporting me. I wouldn't have gotten here without y'all. So let's begin with the first question surrounding Bravelands. Is it a Lion King ripoff? This section will contain slight spoilers, but not nearly as much as the section 2 beyond this one. So within the first 30 pages, you can clearly see why people think Bravelands is a Lion King ripoff. The story opens on a young Fearless, who is a lion, earning his name. Then, a lion called Titan attacks and kills his father, Gallant, using dubious and unlawful weapons, becoming the leader of his pride, and then he orders Fearless's death. In case anyone needs any reminders, in The Lion King, Simba is told about he is a king, which is a title and very similar to a name. Then, right afterwards, his father was killed dubiously by his uncle, Scar, who then ordered Simba killed. These stories sound similar, however, there are differences. Titan isn't Fearless's uncle for one. He's a random lion. Titan also doesn't command hyenas, though he eventually commands golden wolves. A key difference between the two stories is that, unlike that slacker Simba, Fearless seeks out vengeance from day one. Simba was sitting on his butt eating bugs and drinking from coconuts, whilst Fearless was lifting barbells and chugging protein shakes. Simba has to be asked by his childhood crush to go after Scar, while Fearless's childhood crush Keen has to beg him not to chase after Titan, and even breaks up with him because he won't stop seeking vengeance on Titan. Because of Fearless's endless motivation and sense of vengeance, their journeys go very differently. However, both of them end with their opponent getting killed near a fire, something that once again reminds of the similarities between the two lions despite their very different journeys. Another similarity is that they were both raised outside of their species. Fearless was raised by a troop of baboons, and Simba was raised by a pig and a meerkat. Both of them sought advice from a baboon, though in Fearless's case, the baboon was not to be trusted. There are more differences between Simba and Fearless. Fearless temporarily joins Titan's pride, but Simba doesn't join Scar's. Fearless leads a group of lions before getting his vengeance, but Simba doesn't. And Fearless is gay, but Simba isn't. I feel like the two are different enough that you can't call it a ripoff. Getting revenge for your dead father is a very common trope in fiction, which dates back to before even Shakespeare, same as being raised among different species. I mean, just look at Remus and Romulus, whose story of being raised by wolves originated back in Roman times. But let's look beyond the main lion to look at the lions themselves, and how the world of Bravelands operates versus the world of The Lion King. Let's look at the difference between how lions and other animals are treated in the world building of The Lion King and Bravelands. In The Lion King, there's something called the Circle of Life, which all animals live in. The lions are included in this, but they're made to be special. Unlike The Lion King, the lions of the Bravelands are not the centerpiece of the story. In fact, they are sort of the odd ones out. Unlike the other animals in the story, they don't believe in the Great Parent, and they also don't abide by any of the more formal laws of the Bravelands. That's very different from The Lion King, where lions consider themselves part of the Circle of Life and are sort of like the lawmakers of the grasslands. Though the lions are on top of the food chain in Bravelands, they are never made to be more important than their fellow animals. The other animals got just as much attention as the lions, and every species had its own fleshed out culture. It didn't feel like every species was the same. The elephants were different from the hyenas, and the hyenas were different from the crocodiles. I feel like the way it handled the lion's culture was pretty up-to-date and realistic for lions. Sure, male lions rule the pride, but it's pretty clear that the female lions also viewed sway. And it's also made clear that they're the main hunters, and just in general, it seems pretty up-to-date on what lion research is saying about lions. Before Fearless took over Fearless Pride 1, two sisters wanted to step up and lead it, showing that it isn't unheard of to have a female pride leader in the world of Bravelands. The female characters also have agency, which matters a lot in xenofiction books, where sometimes mothers and women are straight up ignored. Now let's talk about a different species, the elephants. The elephants' culture was incredibly interesting, especially to Rage. I was worried with where the Aarons were going with it, and that they might make it a testosterone superpower, or accidentally make it a metaphor for something bad, but it was pretty well handled and not misogynistic at all. The gender separation between elephants was pretty well handled too. In The Lion King, what happens with the other species isn't delved upon much. That is of course in part because of the different formatting. There's a lot less time in a movie than a book to show things, but it's still a difference between the two. I heard that The Lion Guard, a Lion King spin-off series, talks a bit about the different species cultures, but I don't know much about that and I've never watched the series, so I'll move on. Now it's time for what you all came for, the story. This will be a very spoiler-filled section, so skip ahead to the next one, general comments, if you want my less spoiler-filled review on the entire series. We open on Swift Cub. Swift Cub is a lion cub in Gallant Pride. The pride is named for his father, Gallant, who is its leader. He has a sister named Valor, and his mother is named Swift. While practicing hunting, he takes on a deadly scorpion, and earns his new name, Fearless. Literally a minute later, a group of main lions come over and challenge Gallant for his pride. It looks like Gallant will win against their leader, Titan, until his lackeys intervene and kill Gallant for him. Titan then orders the death of Fearless, who escapes into the baboon forest and is saved by Stinger the baboon. Stinger the baboon brings him back to his troop and calls him the Cub of the Stars. A year passes, and though Fearless has found a home among the baboons, he can't stop thinking about revenge on Titan. Meanwhile, he's made a friend, the baboon Thorn. Thorn is undergoing 3 trials in order to determine his placement in the troop's hierarchy. If he fails no trials, he will become a high leaf, one of the highest ranks. Fail 1, a middle leaf. Fail 2, a low leaf. But if he fails all of them, he will be doomed to be a low root. Thorn wants to become a high leaf so he can date Berry, a high leaf who also happens to be Stinger's daughter. However, he sacrifices his position in order for his friend Mud, the prophet's son, to not become a low leaf. The leader of Thorn's troop is killed, and Stinger takes over. Thorn realizes that Stinger was the one who killed her in order to take her place, and confronts him. Stinger says, "You keep your head low and I will reward you," which Thorn does as he is terrified of the murderer possibly murdering him. Then there's the story of Sky the elephant. She keeps getting visions that something terrible will happen to the Great Mother. The Great Mother is the leader of her herd and the host of the Great Spirit, which is pretty much the Avatar but with like psychic abilities instead of elemental powers. Something does happen to the Great Mother. She is driven into the lake by angry animals and killed by crocodiles. Everyone instantly realizes that a mistake was made. Fearless decides to set off on his own and makes the terrible choice to go join Titan's pride, hoping to one day get revenge on him. He hunts along his sister Valor for his mother Swift, who was blinded when Titan took over. He also becomes an older brother figure to Ruthless, Titan's son, who saves his life. Unlike the other lions, Fearless is a believer in the Great Mother. He is often taunted for this and called more of a baboon than a lion. When he hears of the Great Mother's death, he goes to her body. He finds a rhino horn there and determines that Stronghide, who has been calling himself the new Great Father, killed the Great Mother. Fearless has also met with Loyal. Loyal is a lion outside of any pride who was a friend of his father's. Loyal taught him how to hunt and how to be a lion. However, Fearless felt as though he was hiding a secret. Meanwhile, Sky the elephant and her group are bringing the Great Mother's bones to the plains of our ancestors, which is an elephant graveyard. On the way over, they are ambushed by Titan's pride. A bull elephant named Rock helps them drive off the pride, and they arrive at the plains and realize that someone has manipulated Stronghide into killing the Great Mother. Thorn has also realized that someone else was behind Stronghide's attempted murder of the Great Mother. However, Stronghide is now on the verge of death because other animals figured out he was behind the murder of the Great Mother and decide to murder him back. Thorn realizes it could have only been Stinger who manipulated Stronghide and tried to confront Stinger. But then Stinger tells Fearless to kill Thorn. Before that can happen, Sky the elephant shows up and charges them, saving Thorn. Stinger proclaims himself the true Great Father and begins sending out insane rules dictating where each species can graze. Sky meets back up with her family. She tells him that Stinger was responsible for the Great Mother's death, so they go to fight him. But then he managed to kill one of them. How does a baboon kill an elephant, you ask? By dropping an entire tree on her, apparently. Thorn leaves Sky and goes from his forest, Bright Forest, to Crooked Trees. He is also joined by Nut, his ex-bully. They're accepted by the Crooked Trees troop. Thorn also learns the truth about Stinger there. He was originally from Crooked Trees. He killed their last leader and kidnapped his daughter to Bright Forest. Fearless decides to leave Titan Pride and finds Keen and his misshapen pride. They can't decide on a leader, so Fearless challenges all of them to a fight and becomes leader. The pride contains Keen, a few random lions, Snarl, Swift, and her mate. Fearless struggles to keep his pride in check, so he goes to Stinger, who he believes to be the Great Father, for advice. He only then realizes that Stinger had never had his best interests in mind, and is not the true Great Parent. Fearless then decides to rely on Loyal, another lion, for advice. Sky decides that this entire thing can't go on any longer and begins amassing an army. Stinger also amasses his, allying with Titan and his lions. Sky's great herd goes to confront them. They trap Stinger on a tree, and it looks like he might escape until vultures get him. The vultures pick him up and throw him into the lake, where the crocodiles are, killing him in the same way which the first Great Mother was killed. Thorn learns that he can control the vultures. That makes him the Great Father of the Bravelands. Whew, that was a solid 6 or so minutes of plot. You might be thinking that was the entire arc. Think again, that was only half of it! The first arc has Stinger as the main antagonist. The second arc has Titan as the main antagonist. Both of the half arcs share the same protagonists. During this slight time skip, Thorn and Barry have officially become mates. Barry has also become the Crown Leaf, the ruler of the troop. And she's starting to look a bit like Stinger, and is being a bit tyrannical. Thorn confronts her, but then a coup happens, overthrowing her, and they are driven from the forest. Sky has also reconnected with Rock, and the two of them have decided to become life mates. Only after they become life mates does she learn the truth about Rock. A few years ago, he killed River, his crush, because she tried to get in the middle of his fight with another elephant and got pushed off a cliff. Bodies with their hearts missing are starting to show up. Sky finds a body with 2 cheetah cubs besides it, her kits. She decides to take care of them. Their names are Nimble and Lively, and they keep with her for the rest of the arc. Whenever I talk about Sky, just remember she's carrying 2 random cheetah cubs on her at all times. Fearless is currently pretty upset because Titan managed to get away. He's grown even more close with Keen, his boyfriend, and Ruthless, his adopted little brother who also wants revenge on Titan, his own father. Thorn and Barry are fleeing across the plains and trying to find a home. Barry's killed by whatever's eating hearts. They learn their opponents are golden wolves, who eat hearts to gain animals' powers and their spirits, hence the title of the 5th or so book, the Spirit Eaters. Even worse, the golden wolves are being led by Titan and his tiny daughter, Menace. Menace is a literal menace. She just goes around being a brat and calling for random characters' deaths. Apparently she even makes a cameo in the next arc, but I haven't read it yet. Keen gets upset that Fearless is obsessed with plotting revenge and says that he can't date someone who chases death. Fearless gets a new pride after leaving Keen's. Sky learns that River's death was an accident caused by the rage and goes back to liking Rock. Thorn meets a random baboon named Spider. Spider teaches him how to make fire. Thorn uses his Great Father powers to call a great herd against the Spirit Eaters and Titan. Using fire to limit their opponent's options and using their general manpower, they manage to drive them all to the gates of the plains of our ancestors. But then, the Great Herd can't go any further out of fear of desecrating the sacred grounds. Thorn uses his holy powers to make an exception for Fearless. Fearless enters the plains and chases down Titan. He kills Titan, freeing all the spirits that he had eaten, and then collapses, dying as well. Flash forwards a few years. Keen and Ruthless have prides and cubs of their own. Sky has a child with Rock. Thorn is still the Great Parent, and we end on the Bravelands at peace. But that doesn't last for too long, as there are 2 arcs after the first one. Let's move on to a general view beyond the Lion King plagiarism accusations and beyond the story itself. And let's ask the important question, is Bravelands worth reading? My answer is yes, and it is higher quality than a large number of Warrior Cats arcs. A prime contributor to that is that none of the main characters were really skippable. All of them were given enough to do in the book series, and it didn't feel like anyone's story was filler. Thorn annoyed me a lot in book 2 with all of his moping over Barry, but his chapters were still engaging and full of plot, so I didn't skip them. All of the villains were engaging. Stronghide only showed up for one book, but you really got to know him and understand his motivations. Titan was amazing, as was Heartful. Stinger was the cherry on top of the cake, but I do have a bone to pick with the errands on him. Let me begin this with praise, so you can understand just how bad the errands ruined him. Stinger is the perfect villain with clear motivations. He wants to be leader and thinks he knows what is best for Bravelands. He's ruthless and does whatever it takes to win. If you've read Warrior Cats, Stinger is pretty much just Darktail combined with Splashtail, but twice as murderous. He is also a great father to his daughter and loves her more than anything else in the world. Or at least he was. The errands decided to change his motivation so that the entire wanting to do good for Bravelands was just a cover, and really, he's just a sadist who enjoys hurting people. His daughter, who he cares about? No, he just kidnapped her not because he loved her, but to get back at her mother. The errands took a pretty complex villain and just smacked him on the head. It's honestly a worse villain assassination than Queen Wasp being just a servant for an overgrown succulent. So I like to ignore those chapters and just say they never happened, and Stinger is just a conniving baboon who thinks he knows best. Even though Stinger, the primary antagonist, dies in the third book, I feel like the books never lost any tension. The errands were still able to keep up the pace. This is likely because they still had a threat to deal with, Titan, and they reinforced the threat of Titan with the presence of the Golden Wolves. An interesting note on that matter is that Bravelands Arc 1 is the only arc of Bravelands with 6 books. The other arcs, Curse of Sandtongue and Thunder on the Plains, only have 3 books. I feel like that is a good idea, as the first arc was pretty much 2 separate arcs, thinly connected by Titan, and so the second ones can be more conjoined, if you would. If I have one major complaint about this arc, it's Spider and his entire existence. Spider's a baboon who randomly shows up in one of the final books and just exists. We never get an answer on who Spider is or where he's from. He's just there to create and control fire. I would say he is the Rock of the Bravelands, but at least we got some characterization on Rock Beyond Crazy Old Man, and he was fun. Unlike Spider, who's literally just the errands trying to drive the plot forward. But those were all my thoughts on Bravelands. Do you think it's a ripoff of The Lion King, and would you want to read Bravelands in the future? Do you want me to review the next 2 arcs? Comment down below. If you like this video, feel free to subscribe. I make Wings of Fire and Warrior Cats videos pretty often, and your support would mean a lot to me. And to those who are already subscribed, thank you for your continued support. I wouldn't have gotten here without y'all. Peace, Rogan out.